Thank you for joining us for our second of the series of conversations with AIFF with a focus on editing. It promises to be an interesting conversation, so stay tuned.
Hi, good evening. I am Allison Couples. I work at High Output, and we are a premier lighting and grip house in the Boston area. And I'm excited tonight to be talking on AIFF Conversations with Bernice Schneider and Alice Bouvry, both filmmakers. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we're going to talk a little bit. I'd just like to get to know who you are. First, I'd like to know, how did you get into filmmaking? Or where did you study?
I studied at MIT at the Media Lab, and I was lucky enough to study with Ricky Leacock before he went off to Paris. And it was a wonderful environment, and at MIT you learn everything. You have to shoot your own film, you learn how to use the camera, you learn about sound and editing, and I think from the beginning I was pretty enamored with editing.
And I found out about a class at Brandeis, and it was an evening class, so I signed up. And my instructor was an older gentleman who had done newsreels during the war, I think. And he made filmmaking sound so exciting that I decided that I wanted to go to film school. So I went to BU. I went to film school at BU way back when. And then after I graduated from film school, then I was lucky enough to be in a program that is overseen by the Directors Guild of America. It's called the DGA Trainee Program. So I worked on movie sets that in New York, but also that would come into Boston.
And what you brought both of you into documentary filmmaking in particular?
Oh, I love documentary. I just feel like you're going after a story, you're going after the truth, you're following a character, you're following an and I just found it very exciting from the very beginning.
All right, so what was the question?
What brought you into documentary filmmaking in particular?
Well, I was working on movie sets as a assistant director. I worked on feature films that came from LA and New York, and it was exhausting and not as much fun as you would think. So a colleague, at about the time I was thinking about doing something else, a colleague of mine classmate from BU Film School, called me up and needed a co-producer for a film that she was beginning on about the health and environmental effects of Chernobyl. And I was just hooked. It was just so fascinating. We read up on it, we did research, we talked to the scientist who went to Russia to clean up the sarcophagus, and anyway, then I got hooked, and then after that I thought, this is really what I want to do.
You said editing was kind of one of the first things that drew you into film. What about editing is so intriguing to you? What about the process really drew you to it?
Well, I think, in the early days when I was at MIT, we saw Ricky Leacock showed a number of films, and one was Jazz Dance, which was just amazing. The editing was very quick cutting. It was almost like the early MTV or something. And in a short period of time, you're able to tell the beginning of a story or the story. And you're chipping away and adding and chipping away, and just that whole process of how do you come to your story? You come to it in the edit room, it seems. Yes, the producer comes to you with the footage and the idea, but it's not until you really sit down with all of the footage that you make your story, then that your story appears. And one of the things that's so exciting is you have to go with it. It's not, you don't necessarily know this is the direct line I will take. You're open to ideas, and new ideas come to you all the time while you're editing. And so it's the element of surprise. It's the just how things build and eventually click.
Absolutely.
That really intrigued me.
Yeah. And for you as a filmmaker, after you've done all this research, you've done all this shooting, you've kind of almost lived in the shoes of the people you've been, filming and working with. What is it like to go into the editing room for the first time and kind of start to dissect all of that?
It's really exciting. It's my favorite part. And there are filmmakers, directors who like to edit themselves, by themselves, their own projects, but I love working with an editor. I love the collaboration. So Bernice edited my most recent film, and we would just talk and talk and talk about it. And it was funny because in the beginning, I think I had to convince her that I had a good film there. Right. Right. And so, but it shapes in it shapes in the edit room. And after looking at all this footage and listening to all the interviews, and I transcribe everything myself because I want to see I want to see and hear how they're saying something, what it is, refresh my memory, because the film that Bernice edited, A Chance to Dress, I filmed over a period of 12 years.
Wow.
So I had kind of forgotten some of the early interviews and that sort of thing, so going back.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was so wonderful is looking at it together. So you knew you had this footage, you hadn't seen it in a while, I'm seeing it for the first time, so it's fresh, and then we're bouncing off of each other of, what my first impressions were, what your impressions are, and it changes. We kept bouncing off of each other, which was wonderful.
It's really fun. I mean, I really enjoy it, and she's a very independent editor, I have to say. So, I would come in, she would call me, and then we would talk through things.
Swimming.
Take care of it, dear. I know. It was fun because she would, after talking about what it was that we thought where the piece was going, then she would say, okay, now leave me alone, and then she'd work for maybe a day or two, and then I'd come in, and then we'd review it and talk about it, and it shapes up that way. But we rearrange things, and I think the opening is
the opening
always
was tough.
the hardest.
Sure.
Always the hardest. What are people going to see in the very beginning, that first frame? What are you going to be showing them? And it's always a big discussion.
Yeah, and in this film in particular, we didn't want the opening shot to be a shocker. We wanted it to be, which would be natural too, get something that grabs people right away.
Right.
And I think we both felt that let's just see what we could do to slowly get into the film. And so, I mean, if you want to introduce John.
Right. The film that we're talking about is a short documentary that we made called A Chance to Dress. And it's about Dr. John Southard, who's a MIT geology professor emeritus, who came out as a cross-dresser at the tender age of 65. So we profile his journey. We explore the issues of cross-dressing and gender identity and gender expression. And it just kind of unfolds. But the question was, how are we going to allow this story to unfold? And are we going to hit people from the get-go with John putting on lipstick or not? And so, because he's a very world-renowned and award-winning geologist, I really wanted to highlight his professional life. So we worked and worked on that opening and finally decided to show him, you know, in the Rockies, in the Canadian Rockies, looking at rocks and discussing. He's with a student and he's discussing his process there. And yeah, I think it was kind of a controversial opening in a way, because I think the instinct is to have him, again, to be dressing or doing something maybe titillating or something like that. But he's not like that. He's, in fact, I mean, he's adorable and very dynamic and a lot of fun. But he's also kind of schoolmarmy in the way that he wears his sort of the way he dresses, generally speaking. Although I think in a little while we're going to see a clip of him that it was a photo shoot and he got all dressed up and it was just fabulous. Anyway, there was a lot.
He knows how to ham it up.
And he does. He's got a
good.
lot of personality. He's got a lot of spunk.
But the film also goes back into his early days. So he talks about his early days, and there's some very moving moments where he's really revealing. I mean, I think one of the things you get very close with your subject that you're filming, and you have to. I think you have to have that relationship, and it really shows in this film.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, we brought in his wife plays a big role in the film and in his life. She's very supportive of his cross-dressing, and there's some really humorous kind of moments there where she, you know, helps him select dresses and, you know, does his hair and things like that, which is really, I mean, it's more than just kind of a fun thing to see and hear. It's really she's really an example and a role model of wives of cross-dressers who really are unsure how to support or you know, help their husbands. And this is a very unique, well, I would say it's a separate group of the LGBT community. They are not the group that I'm exploring in this film are heterosexual cross-dressers. They don't identify as gay or lesbian, and they don't identify as transgender. They are simply heterosexual men who enjoy dressing in women's clothing to express that feminine side of themselves. So it's because of that, I think they're very secretive. Most of them are not out yet. And because they're married and would like to remain so. And so they've kept it a secret for most of their lives.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll be right back and we'll look at some clips and we'll talk about those.
My latest acquisition, when we were in Vermont visiting Jean's daughter, I spotted these not very expensive, but engagingly dangly earrings, which are nice because I like earrings that I can see, hear, and feel. And these, if I lean forward, I can actually see them, and I can hear them jingling, and I can feel them.
I found out years after we got married that John really wanted to tell me about himself early on, about his cross-dressing. But actually, I beat him to it. We were somewhere, and he made a remark about lipstick.
So at that time, I sort of went halfway. I did my nails, wore lipstick, etc., but wasn't fully dressed.
I don't know what made me wonder about why he said something about lipstick the way he said it, but after I'd had a chance to think about it, I decided to ask him whether he ever wore lipstick. And so I did, and he told me, yes, in fact, he had worn lipstick from time to time.
So did I ever think about myself as a cross-dresser? I think I'd have to say yes, from early on. That term wasn't in common use then, and I wasn't aware of it. But I knew that I was what people now call a cross-dresser. It was hard for me to admit that to myself. It gave me a lot of shame and embarrassment. And I never had any contact with cross-dressers that I know of. But yes, I knew I was that kind of person.
Welcome back to Conversations. I'm here with Bernice Schneider and Alice Bouvy, and we're discussing Chance the Dress. And so for this particular clip, you had, you actually organized a photo shoot. It's not something he would normally do. So how did you approach that with him as a filmmaker?
Well, let me backtrack a little bit. At the beginning of this clip, we introduce John just trying on some earrings. And we don't see him in the full dress quite yet. But then, you know, shortly after that, we see him really sort of camping it up in his fancy dress. And because he's a geologist, he calls himself Tephra. That's his fem name. And Tephra means this volcanic ash that's spewed out of volcanoes. He likes that name, so he calls himself Tephra. So I asked John if Tephra would participate in a photo shoot, because generally he's not performance oriented at all. He's not like that at all. And my thought was, I wanted to see Tephra or John dressed in a way that made him feel the way she looks. And I hired a professional photographer, and she had her hair done by, you know, somebody who knew what they were doing, and she just looked beautiful, Tephra. And she really started to enjoy this shoot. She was, I think, a little apprehensive about it, but she was game to do it. And so the photographer took still photos, and then on my camera, I took a video of the photo shoot. So then that's when Bernice worked her magic. Yeah.
And intercutting the video with the still and making some sort of montage that, you know, was really fun and representative of how she was feeling at that moment.
And I think she was feeling as beautiful as she looked. I mean, she, you know, it just brought all of that expression.
And charisma.
That feminine expression that she has. It just brought it all out. So.
And how did you bring that out kind of in the editing room, that charisma, that kind of, how did you approach kind of making that come to life?
Let's see. I guess that's hard. It's like, how do you do it? Well, you just have fun with it. You just relax into what you're watching, and you just start getting an idea, and one idea builds on another. And I think there was music in that section, which helps a lot.
Yeah.
And then you'd extract out. He has these really sweet sort of mannerisms sometimes, and so when we see that,
So I saw enough of the footage of him where he has these adorable little expressions he has with his hands or his face, and so that was part. I wanted to include that in that montage, so you'd get a sense of his personality as well as.
So I think that's all we have time for at this moment. Thank you so much. Welcome back to AIFF Conversations. I'm here with Alice Bouvy, Bernice Schneider, and April from the AIFF organization.
Yes, and it's a pleasure to be on a panel with all women in film. It's really exciting. I remember when I first met you, Alice, we came to watch your film, Thy Will Be Done, at the Robbins Library.
Right.
another amazing film that you've done, and we just connected with the work that you were doing and asked you to be a judge for the festival. You've been a judge now since the inception of the festival for 7 years.
Right.
What has that been like for you?
Oh, it's been really interesting. I mean, more and more submissions every year. I think in the very beginning, there were, well, I don't remember how many, but there were enough so that all of the judges could watch all of the films. And then we'd get together and we'd all talk about it. And then each year there were more, and then it became, then we kind of splintered off into documentary narratives, animation, shorts, full length, that kind of thing. So it's changed, and now you have how many submissions?
More than 3,000 a year now, and they're coming from all over the world. We started out with having a person post on international film boards, and now we do post, but it's like the word of mouth is out now, and we just start getting film submissions even before we advertise on film boards.
Wow.
And then I learned about you through the film that we chose, the judges chose, Ancor's Children. So that, and it was lovely to find out that the two of you had worked together on films. How did you actually choose Bernice to edit your film?
Well, I've known Bernice for quite a while, and she's always busy, is the thing. And right at the very end, when I was finishing up I Will Be Done with another editor, that editor left, went out of town, and I just needed a few things done.
I think I worked on that for about a week.
Yeah,
Not even.
and so I
just
called
jumped on.
Bernice in, and she was available, and so when a chance to dress, when I was working on that, when that came up, then I really tried to grab her early on, and basically waited for her until she was ready, because I love her.
We worked very well together.
She's a lot of fun to work with. I mean, and that's because it's a very intimate kind of, well, it's a relationship. It's a personal relationship, and spend a lot of time together. So
you have to like the person
you
you're
have
working
to
with.
like.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of psychology that you have to share probably in terms of coming to decision making about where you want the film to go.
Right. Yeah.
And being comfortable being very open with how we're feeling about a piece or a cut or an idea, and that it's okay to make mistakes, and just I think that trust is really important, and you have to establish that early on in the film, in the filmmaking process together.
It's amazing the amount of people that we have in the film industry that have done so well and have such amazing portfolios like the two of you. It's just, we're really privileged to be
And they're
in this
local.
area. And we're local, that's right.
Yeah.
It's local.
And that's tribute to, I think, your festival too, that you really profile. I mean, it's an international festival, and you honor films from all over, but you also honor, I think, the local filmmakers too, and the high school.
We try to do that, yes, we do. And then, Allison, we met you through High Output. We were invited this past summer to have a short international screenings on the Greenway, and High Output came to our rescue, setting up on the Greenway. I mean, what an organization, to be able to get that done outside.
Absolutely.
What is it like to be on the other side of the filmmaking and
it's
organizational?
It's a thrill. I mean, we get to support films on all sides because of what we do. So we work with films through production, and then we have the ability to do screenings as well. So we get to kind of be there afterwards once the film is out, and kind of get the word out there and do events like we did on the Greenway. So it's a really interesting kind of connection to the film world, in that in any given day, unlike a filmmaker, I'm working with people on 10, 15, 20 different projects. So I know
Wow.
really what's going on in town.
I'm sure you
From the students that are making films to the feature films that are in town shooting. So it's a real joy in a lot of ways, and it's a very different experience every day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we're very honored to have worked with all three of you. So thank you so much for the work that you do and for sharing it with us and our audience.
Thank you.
Do we have time? Do we have time? Because you could talk about all of the stuff that you do. You have screenings at the library, and then you have this, and you have you're all over the place.
We are, but I think that that'll do it.
Okay.
But
Are
thank
we
you,
wrapping?
love.
I can't see if we're wrapping up.
Yeah. So I think we're
So thank you
we done
so
here?
much for joining us this evening. Thank you for having this conversation and coming, and it was a really wonderful experience, both for me, and I thank you to the audience for watching. If you would like to learn more about the Arlington International Film Festival, please check out their website at AIFFEST.org. Thank you so much.